Dr. Heijin Park stood at the window of the Stellar Pioneer's observation deck. The stars looked different here, so far from Earth. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and watched his breath make small clouds on its surface. The ship had been in space for 3 years, studying different solar systems, but today felt different. The emergency alarm started ringing at exactly 3:15 ship time. Heijin was drinking his morning coffee when the captain's voice came through the speakers. All science team members report to the main lab immediately. When Heijin reached the lab, he found his team already there. They were all looking at the main screen. On it was something that made Heijin's coffee cup slip from his fingers and crash to the floor. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The image on the screen showed a spaceship, but it wasn't like any ship Heijin had ever seen before. It looked almost alive, with a surface that reminded him of fur rather than metal. And it was huge, at least 3 times bigger than the Stellar Pioneer. "They're trying to talk to us," said Captain Yoon, walking into the lab. "The message came in 10 minutes ago. It's in perfect English." The captain played the message. A deep, rough voice filled the room. "Greetings, Earth vessel. We are the Lycanids. We have been watching your progress for some time. We think you are ready for first contact." Heijin felt his heart beating faster. As the ship's lead xenobiologist, he had spent years studying possible alien life forms, but nothing had prepared him for this. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The captain set up a secure communication channel with the alien ship. Heijin and his team prepared the meeting room according to first contact protocols. Security officers checked and double-checked their equipment. When the Lycanids finally came aboard, Heijin thought he was dreaming. The aliens walked on 2 legs, but they were covered in thick, gray fur. Their faces were a mix of human and wolf features. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with powerful muscles moving under their fur. They looked exactly like the werewolves from Earth's old stories. The leader of the Lycanid group introduced himself with a name that sounded like a gentle growl. "You may call me Rin," he said, showing sharp teeth in what seemed to be a smile. "We have waited a long time for this meeting." Heijin stepped forward, his scientific training taking over despite his shock. "I'm Dr. Heijin Park, xenobiologist. Welcome aboard the Stellar Pioneer." Rin's yellow eyes studied Heijin with intelligence that seemed both alien and familiar. "Dr. Park, what your people call werewolves. They were not myths. They were memories." The room went quiet. Heijin felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Your ancestors knew us," Rin said. "We visited Earth many times in the past, but your people were not ready then. They turned our visits into stories of monsters and curses. We decided to wait until humanity reached the stars. Now, you are ready to learn the truth." Heijin looked at Captain Yoon, who nodded slowly. This was why they had come into space, to find answers to humanity's biggest questions. But no one had expected that Earth's ancient myths might actually be scientific fact. "We have much to tell you," Rin said, "and much to learn from you as well. This is just the beginning." Heijin pulled out his tablet, his hand shaking slightly with excitement. As a scientist, he knew this was the most important moment in human history. As a human being, he couldn't help but wonder what other Earth legends might turn out to be true. The truth about werewolves was just the first chapter in humanity's new story among the stars. 2 weeks after the first contact, Jaewon Kim stood in a cave on the Lycanid homeworld. The air was cool and damp, and her flashlight beam showed drawings on the walls that made her hands shake. She had studied ancient cave art on Earth for 15 years, but she had never expected to find something like this on another planet. "These paintings," she said, touching the rough stone wall. "They're exactly like the ones in France. The same style, the same colors." She turned to Rin, who stood watching her with his yellow eyes. "How is this possible?" The cave walls showed figures that were half human and half wolf, hunting under a full moon. The red and black paint was faded, but the images were clear. Next to these figures were spaceships that looked like the one that had met the stellar pioneer. Our ancestors made these paintings about their visits to Earth, Rin explained. They wanted to remember the humans they met and the friendship they shared. Jaiwan's research team had spread out through the cave system. Their excited voices echoed off the walls as they found more paintings. Dr. Heijin Park was taking samples of the paint, while other scientists took photographs and made scans. "Look at this," called out one of the researchers. Everyone hurried over to see what he had found. On the wall was a perfect copy of a cave painting Jaiwan had seen hundreds of times in textbooks. It showed the same scene as a famous painting in the Lascaux caves of France, but with one big difference. In this version, the hunters had wolf-like features. "We taught your ancestors how to make these paintings," Rin said. "We showed them how to mix the colors, how to tell stories on cave walls. We were their teachers." Jaiwan sat down on a rock, trying to process what this meant. All these years, we thought early humans developed art on their own. But they had help. They had teachers from the stars. Heijin walked over with his testing equipment. The paint is made from the same materials as Earth cave paintings. The same minerals, the same techniques. This proves it wasn't a coincidence. As they explored deeper into the cave, they found more evidence. There were paintings showing lichenids teaching humans how to make fire, how to build shelters, and how to track animals. The scenes meshed stories from human mythology around the world. "But why did you leave?" Jaiwan asked Rin. "Why did these meetings stop?" Rin's expression grew sad. "Some humans began to fear us. They started telling stories about curses and monsters. We realized that humanity needed time to grow on its own. So we left, but we kept watching, waiting for the right time to return." Jaiwan looked at her tablet, where she had stored thousands of images of Earth's cave art. Now she would have to rethink everything she thought she knew about human history. The truth was far more amazing than any theory she had studied. "We should tell the world," Heijin said, but Jaiwan shook her head. "We need to be careful," she said. "This will change everything people believe about human history. We need to gather more evidence first." As they walked back to their ship that evening, Jaiwan looked up at the strange stars above the lichenid world. Somewhere out there was Earth, where cave paintings had held this secret for thousands of years, waiting to be understood. Dr. Heijin Park watched through the laboratory window as Professor Ta-Hyun Lee prepared for another test. Inside the testing chamber, a lichenid volunteer named Mok stood calmly. They had been studying the lichenid's transformation ability for the past month, and today they hoped to understand how it worked. "Are you ready, Mok?" Ta-Hyun asked through the speaker. The tall, furry figure nodded. Heijin turned on the scanning equipment. The screens lit up with detailed images of Mok's body. Bones, muscles, and cells all appeared in perfect detail. Then, Mok began to change. The transformation was nothing like the painful, violent changes shown in Earth movies. Instead, it was smooth and gentle, like water flowing into a new shape. In less than 30 seconds, Mok had changed from his wolf-like form into something that looked almost human. "Amazing," Ta-Hyun whispered, studying the readings. "Their cells can reshape themselves at will. It's like watching evolution happen in seconds instead of millions of years." Heijin looked at the numbers appearing on his screen. Their body temperature barely changes during transformation. And look at their heart rate. It's completely steady. This isn't painful for them at all. Mok's voice came through the speaker, now sounding less growly in his human-like form. "On our world, we learn to control our shape when we are young. It is as natural as walking." The scientists had discovered that lichenid DNA could change its structure instantly, something that should have been impossible. Even more surprising, they could control exactly how much they wanted to change. They could become fully wolf-like, fully human-like, or anything in between. "The moon has nothing to do with it," Heijin said, thinking about all the old werewolf stories. "They can change whenever they want to." The moon stories began because our ancestors often visited Earth during full moons, Mok explained. We could see better in the dark, and it was easier to meet with humans in secret. Tai-hyun was studying tissue samples under a microscope. Their cells contain a special protein we've never seen before. It lets them rebuild their bodies without losing any energy. This could revolutionize medicine on Earth. Hejin remembered something else from the old stories. What about silver? The myths say silver hurts werewolves. Mok made a sound that might have been a laugh. Silver was precious to us because it conducts energy well. We used it in our technology. Humans saw us collecting it and thought it was our weakness. As they continued their tests, more Earth myths about werewolves were proven wrong. The lichenids didn't lose control of themselves when they changed. They weren't violent creatures hunting for prey. They were scientists and explorers, just like the humans studying them. We should publish these findings, Hejin said to Tai-hyun later that day. They were reviewing their test results in the main lab. The world needs to understand what the lichenids really are, Tai-hyun agreed. Not monsters from stories, but advanced beings who might be able to help us in ways we never imagined. Hejin looked at their research notes. Every page showed how wrong humans had been about werewolves. But the truth was better than any story. It was proof that the universe held wonders beyond imagination, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look past old fears and myths. Sun Meikang adjusted her uniform one last time before stepping onto the stage. The United Nations Assembly Hall was filled with representatives from every nation on Earth. Today, they would meet the first official lichenid delegation. The room fell silent as the massive doors opened. 5 lichenids walked in, their fur gleaming under the lights. They moved with grace despite their large size. Sunmai noticed how some delegates leaned back in their chairs, while others leaned forward with interest. Distinguished delegates, Sunmai began, her voice steady. Today marks the beginning of the first official cultural exchange program between Earth and the lichenid people. The lead lichenid, who called himself Rak, stepped forward. In his deep voice, he began to tell the assembly about their past visits to Earth. He showed ancient photographs and documents that proved lichenids had helped human civilization grow. Your stories of guardian spirits who protected villages. Those were our people, Rak explained. The legends of wise beings who taught humans to build better tools. Those were our teachers. Sun Mai watched the delegates' faces change from fear to wonder as Rak continued. He showed videos of lichenid cities, where beautiful buildings seemed to grow from the ground like crystal trees. Their technology was advanced, but they used it to protect nature, not destroy it. We have lived among you in secret for centuries, Rak revealed. Some of us stayed behind to watch over humanity's progress. We helped when we could, always in secret, always careful not to interfere too much. A delegate from Japan stood up. Are you saying that some people we know might actually be lichenids? Rak nodded. We can take human form perfectly. Some of us chose to live as humans, to better understand your ways. They became doctors, teachers, and helpers in your communities. The assembly burst into excited whispers. Sun Mai could see both worry and amazement on people's faces. She had expected this reaction. It was not easy to learn that creatures from ancient myths were real and had been helping humanity all along. We propose to share our knowledge with you openly now, Rak continued. No more secrets, no more hiding. We believe humanity is ready for a true partnership. Sunma stepped forward again. The first exchange program will include scientists, artists, and students from both worlds. We will learn from each other, grow together, and build a better future for both our peoples. Later that evening, as Sun Mai watched the news reports about the meeting, she felt proud. The world was changing fast, but in a good way. Humans were finally learning that they were not alone in the universe, and their oldest myths held more truth than anyone had imagined. This is just the beginning, she said to Rak as they watched the sunset from her office. There will be challenges ahead, but we've taken the first step. Rak nodded, his yellow eyes reflecting the orange sky. Your people are learning to see with new eyes. The stories that once frightened them are becoming bridges to understanding. Du Yan Choi stood before the crowd gathered in Seoul's Central Plaza. The evening air was cold, but the anger in his voice was hot. Thousands of people had come to hear him speak about the Lycanid threat, and his words were being broadcast worldwide. They have been hiding among us for centuries. Du Yan shouted into the microphone. They wear human faces while keeping their true nature secret. How can we trust them now? Dr. Hae-Jin Park watched the broadcast from his laboratory, his heart heavy. 3 months of peaceful exchange with the Lycanids was now at risk because of fearmongers like Du Yan. The protest signs in the crowd showed pictures of monster wolves, nothing like the gentle, intelligent Lycanids he had come to know. The numbers are growing, said Sun Mikang, walking into the lab with a worried expression. Similar protests are happening in other cities. People are scared. Hae-Jin nodded at his computer screen. Look at this, he said. He had been analyzing population data, and what he found was surprising. There are patterns in our medical records. Places where people heal faster than normal, where children are mysteriously healthier. I think some Lycanids have been quietly helping us for generations. Sun Lai leaned closer to look at the data. You mean they've been using their advanced biology to heal humans? Yes, but very carefully. They became doctors, nurses, and medical researchers. They helped develop many of our modern medicines. Hae-Jin pulled up more files. But if Du Yan's followers find out about this? Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. On the news, they saw angry crowds gathering outside hospitals. Someone had leaked a list of suspected Lycanid doctors. The protesters demanded that all medical staff be tested to prove they were human. This is exactly what the Lycanids feared, Sun Mai said quietly. Why they kept themselves hidden for so long. Human fear can turn to hatred so quickly. In his office at the protest headquarters, Du Yan smiled as he watched the chaos spread. He took out an old photograph that showed his grandfather standing next to a strange, wolf-like figure. His grandfather had told him stories about the Lycanids, but not stories of friendship. These were dark tales of power and control, of creatures playing with human lives like pieces on a game board. Your secrets are coming out now, he whispered to the photograph. All of them. Back at the laboratory, Hae-Jin and Sun Mai worked frantically to gather evidence of all the good the Lycanids had done. They had records of lives saved, diseases cured, and communities protected. But would facts be enough to fight against fear? We need to show people the truth, Hae-Jin said, looking at the growing crowds on the news. Not just about what the Lycanids are, but about what humanity can become with their help. The sun set over a city divided by fear and hope, while both humans and hidden Lycanids wondered if centuries of peaceful coexistence were about to end. Senior archivist Min Ho-yoon walked through the silent halls of the National Archives late at night. His security badge allowed him access to the deepest levels, where the government kept its oldest secrets. After hearing Do Yan Choi's speeches, Min Ho had remembered something strange he had seen years ago in these files. He found the box he was looking for in Section K, deep underground. The label said, Unexplained Phenomena, 1950 to 1960, but Min Ho knew better now. His hand shook as he opened the old folder. Inside were hundreds of photographs and reports. They showed Lycanids meeting with world leaders in secret. The meetings went back decades. Presidents, prime ministers, and kings had all known the truth about the wolf-like beings from space. I thought I might find you here, said a voice behind him. Min Ho turned to see Dr. Hae-Jin Park standing in the doorway. Sun Mai told me you were looking into old government files. Min Ho handed Hae-Jin the folder. Look at this. They knew. All this time, they knew. Hae-Jin read through the documents quickly. The papers showed that governments around the world had made agreements with the Lycanids years ago. The aliens could stay on Earth and help humans, but they had to keep their true nature hidden. The Lycanids helped us stop wars, Min Ho said, pointing to certain reports. They gave us medical knowledge. They even helped prevent nuclear accidents. But everything was kept secret. Does Du Yun know about these files? He Jin asked. No, but he's demanding access to all government records about aliens. If he finds these, Minho didn't finish his sentence. They both knew what could happen. Just then, Minho's phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Du Yun's supporters had broken into several hospitals, demanding to test all doctors and nurses. Some Lycanid doctors had been forced to reveal their true forms to protect their patients from the angry crowds. We have to do something, He Jin said. These files prove the Lycanids have been helping us all along. They've saved millions of lives. Minho looked at his security badge, then at the files. Taking classified documents out of the archives was a serious crime. He could lose his job or go to jail, but keeping the truth hidden any longer could lead to something much worse. Help me carry these boxes, he said to He Jin. The world needs to know the whole story. As they carefully packed the most important files, they could hear sirens in the distance. The city was full of angry protesters, but in their hands they held proof that could change everything. The truth about the Lycanids wasn't just about aliens living among humans. It was about decades of cooperation and help that had shaped the modern world. Sometimes, Minho said as they carried the heavy boxes out, keeping secrets can be more dangerous than telling the truth. Dr. He Jin Park stared at the test results on his screen, then ran the analysis again. Beside him, Lycanid scientist Ki Su-nam waited patiently. They had been working together for weeks, studying both human and Lycanid DNA, trying to understand why their species seemed so compatible. This can't be right, He Jin said, running the test for the third time. But the results stayed the same. The evidence is clear, Ki Su said softly. Our species share the same ancestors. We are cousins, separated by millions of years of evolution. The laboratory was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. On the screens, 2 DNA patterns moved side by side. One was human, one was Lycanid. At certain points, they matched perfectly. But how is this possible? He Jin asked. He looked at the ancient star charts they had found in the government files Minho had recovered. Did your people come from Earth originally? Ki Su shook his head. No. The truth is even more interesting. Both our species came from somewhere else, a world much older than Earth or our current home. Outside the laboratory, they could hear protesters in the streets. Du Yun's movement had grown larger, and now there were counter-protests too. Some humans were standing up for their Lycanid neighbors and colleagues. He Jin picked up his phone and called Sun Mikang. We found it, he said. The real reason why Lycanids can take human form so easily, why they've always felt connected to Earth. We're related. We're family. The discovery spread quickly through the scientific community. Both human and Lycanid researchers confirmed the findings. The two species had evolved from the same ancient spacefaring civilization. While one group had settled on Earth and evolved into humans, another had found a different world and become the Lycanids. This explains the cave paintings, Jai-Won Kim said when she heard the news. The ancient Lycanids who visited Earth weren't just teaching strangers. They were helping their long-lost relatives. In his protest headquarters, Du Yan Choi received the scientific reports. His hand shook as he read them. All his life, he had believed the Lycanids were dangerous aliens. Now he learned that they were Earth's long-lost cousins, sharing the same ancient ancestors. The universe is bigger than we imagined, Ki Su said to He Jin as they prepared to announce their findings to the world. But it's also smaller. We are all connected, all part of the same story. The protests began to quiet as the news spread. Humans and Lycanids looked at each other with new eyes, seeing not monsters or aliens, but family separated by time and space, finally reunited. The Great Hall of the United Nations was more crowded than it had ever been. Sun Mikang stood at the podium, with representatives from every nation seated before her. On one side sat human delegates, on the other side sat lichenids in both their natural and human forms. Today, we write a new chapter in the story of both our peoples. Sunmai began. We are not just allies or neighbors. We are family, separated by millions of years, finally reunited. The screens behind her showed the DNA evidence that Dr. Hae-Jin Park and Ki Su-nam had discovered. The images were simple enough for everyone to understand. Two patterns that matched like pieces of an ancient puzzle. In the audience, Do Hyun Choi sat quietly. The past week had changed him completely. After learning the truth about his grandfather's photographs, he had discovered that his own grandfather had been saved by a lichenid doctor during the Korean War. The monster he had feared was actually his family's guardian. For centuries, the lichenids have lived among us. Sunmai continued. They have been our doctors, our teachers, our protectors. They kept their true nature hidden because they feared we weren't ready to understand. Today, we proved them wrong. She pressed a button, and new images appeared on the screens. They showed the classified files Minho had found. Decades of secret cooperation between humans and lichenids that had made the world better. We stand at a crossroads, Sunmai said. We can choose fear, or we can choose understanding. We can hide from the truth, or we can embrace it. Hae-Jin watched from his seat as Do Hyun stood up and walked to the podium. The hall went silent. Everyone knew him as the man who had led the protests against the lichenids. I was wrong, Do Hyun said simply. I let fear blind me to the truth. The lichenids are not our enemies. They are our long-lost brothers and sisters, and it's time we welcome them home. The hall erupted in applause. Human and lichenid delegates stood together, their differences forgotten in the joy of reunion. Centuries of secrecy and fear were ending, replaced by hope for a shared future. Later that evening, Hae-Jin stood with Ki Su on the roof of the UN building, watching the sun set over New York City. Below them, humans and lichenids walked together in the streets, no longer hiding their true forms. What happens now? Hae-Jin asked. Ki Su smiled, his wolf-like features gentle in the fading light. Now we learn from each other. Now we explore the stars together, as we were always meant to do. Perhaps we'll find more of our family out there. The old stories of werewolves would never be the same. They had changed from tales of monsters into a true story more wonderful than any myth. A story of family found, of wisdom shared, and of two peoples joining hands to walk together into the future.